Right, so this is the photograph reference we're working from. Now, at the moment, I feel that the mound of Higger Tor here is a little bit central. So I want to try and get that just a little bit below centre, and that'll just squash up this land a little bit. Compositionally, I think it's not quite right. So I'm just going to find the centre of my paper, say there. And then I'm just going to make sure I'm coming below it. So I'm going to draw a line across there, which is below centre. I'm going to say that that is the top edge of Higger Tor. Now, proportionately, doesn't matter what size paper you're working on. What I did was I just put a mark at either end of that mound there, and I measured it, and it's 7 centimetres, and my bit of paper is 14 centimetres. So actually, the length of that is half whatever your piece of paper is. And my piece of paper is 36. So my Higger Tor is 18 centimetres long. So I can put my ruler on here now and position it. So it wants to be about there, I would say. So one end there. One end there. So I'm just going to draw those lines down there. So my Higger Tor is going to sit within that box there. So if I just quickly draw that in, that's that dropping edge there, and I can rove it along here about a third of the way on. It sort of jumps up a bit, roves up, comes down again, drops down, and then sweeps down like that. So once you've got that plotted, then it's just a case then of putting the rocks in as well. So we're going to be sat drawing for a little while. This main rock in the foreground, look, it comes out of the paper here just beyond halfway. So it's about here. So it's a pretty big rock, that one. And it sweeps up and round and down like that. So once you've got that rock in, the others should then sort of take care of themselves. Like that. Right, so we've got all the drawing done now, and I'm just going to put a sky on here. So I've got a blob of ultramarine here, and I'm going to mix a lovely plum colour. This is the colour that we use all the time. Not much water in that, plenty of the light red just to get that into a lovely dark plum colour. And I've got some raw sienna on the palette here, straight from the tube, and I've also put a little bit of cerulean blue on the palette there as well. So if we want to put the blue, a little bit of blue in the sky, we've got a bit of an issue, because if I wet the sky and then pick the raw sienna up with the hake and put that in, which I'm going to put in this lower area, I don't want to bring the blue in contact with the raw sienna because it will turn green. So I've just got to keep them separate. But I also don't want to pick the blue up with the hake because it'll have some raw sienna in it. So if you wash the hake out, then the hake will be full of water and it might be too wet then to pick the blue up. So it's a slightly awkward thing. So the best way to do this always is to use two brushes. Just use the hake as normal, but then introduce another brush, either a large round brush or a second hake or the mini hake, just to put the blue in, and then return to the original hake again. This will make sense as I paint it. So what I'm going to do is I've got my two hakes at the moment, the large hake and the mini hake, soaking in the water. So let's get the paper wet. So I'm using the large hake because I've got a 15 by 11 piece of paper here. It's quite a big painting, and I'm basically making sure I get plenty of water below the drawing because I want the sky to pass down all the way down to here. So as ever, the idea is to get plenty of water on the tape around the edge and to make sure that it's evenly spaced out. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to get the other hake. Okay, so to make sure that this has got just the right amount of water in it, if I use that as well to spread the water out, So I'm using first one hake and then the other. What that's doing is it's sort of guaranteeing that both those brushes are sort of equally wet. And that's a really good way to do it. So that brush now, I know, hasn't got too much water in it. And that's ready now for me to pick up the cerulean. So I'm going to just put that to one side. Let's get some, I'd recommend you just watch me do the whole sky before you start painting. There's the raw sienna, and I want to make sure I get plenty of that down here over covering the top of the Higger Tor there, leaving lots of white space above. Then I'm going to just get the second hake and pick up some of the cerulean, and I'm going to just flick in some cerulean blue in that upper area. Let's have a little bit more over here. So the two have not come together, so it's not going to go green. And then I'm going to go back to the original hake and just pick up, let's just pick up a small amount of the plum to start. And the idea is just to sort of drag this in from the tape. So start all your brush strokes on the tape and just drag the paint in from the edge. So I'm coming into the picture from the left here. And what this does is it produces a little focal point in the sky. A couple of clouds just drifting across here. God, it's such a gentle touch. Bob Ross calls this whispering. Whispering with a brush. It's such a gentle touch. And let's just have a little bit more. But when you put the second lot in, this sort of stronger stuff at the end, don't overwork it. Just drop it in and let it move by itself. Because so many people fiddle with that last stage for too long. The sky is going to change significantly over the next minute or so as that dries. I've got a splash there in my sky. I'm just going to try and flick that out, make it look more like a cloud than a splash. That's just because I'm a bit clumsy and I dribbled, that's okay. There's a hair or two here, can you see, that's come out my brush. So I'm going to try and get rid of that one and that one, but you just got to be so careful you don't ruin your sky getting rid of them. If you do it too late, that's okay, I think I've got away with that. Yeah. There we are. I think I've got away with it. That's it. So I'm going to leave that to settle off. That's going to be a really, really lovely sky, but it's still going to change quite a bit from where it is now. So I'm just going to leave that to dry naturally. You can get rid of this excess at the bottom. You can use a bit of kitchen towel just to dab that off if you want. There we go. So that's painted and that's dry now, and I'm quite happy with the sky. We just got to get some distant hills on over here. Now it's really important, I'm going to use a number 8, but it's really important that we get this right. So I'm going to use the plum colour on the palette, but it's very dangerous to use the plum that's in this puddle here. So take some of that and put it completely separate part of the palette there, and then add water to it, so that you know that when you pick that up in the brush, you know exactly what consistency it is. And then for goodness sake, test it and make sure that it's really pale. You see, I still think that's too dark. I still think that's too dark. This is why testing it's really important. So I put another couple of brush loads in that. That's a little bit thinner again now, as you can see. Look, it's paler again. So I don't want it any darker than that, but also it's a case of trying to get them on in with a minimum movement. So I'm going to just load the brush there, look, and just drag the paint along. I'll have that coming down. I might just have it rising up and flattening out and then dropping again, and that's it. So I'm going to use the mini hake again. Let's wet this area down here because it's quite an expansive area. So I'm just wetting it within about 1/4 of an inch of the ridge there. And I just said to my art group in here that a few weeks ago we did mist. And I kept shouting at everybody, more water, more water, more water, get it wetter. And it's very difficult because I don't know why everybody's a bit scared of water. But it does need to be wet. There we are, there's plenty of water on that. Let's get some raw sienna now. And I'll just paddle that raw sienna all the way across that foreground, right down over the rocks. And this is just an underwash, by the way, so it doesn't matter if it's a bit patchy. I'm going to put a little bit of burnt sienna in it as well. That'll do nicely there. And then just like before with the number 6, I'm going to go right up here now and I'm going to put in my ridge. And I'm just going to make sure it touches the paint below. Now, obviously, one of the big challenges with this is the fact that you want to take your time and get this ridge right, but the problem is the longer you take, the more the paint below is going to be drying on you, which is why it's even more important to make sure that you get plenty on to start with. There we are, you can see it's starting to bleed down into the paint below. Sweep that down there. I'm just going to pick a little bit more up before I do my, just going to just strengthen the ridge just a touch because I didn't feel it was quite dark enough. I've gone into some slightly stronger paint there. Okay, and now it's time for me to wash and dab the brush. Wash and dab on the rag, which I've lost. I'll just pull it through my fingers instead, and then just gently sweep down. So you can see I'm using the side of the brush rather than the point. So in the middle I'm coming sort of straight down, and then I've flicked the brush round to get the movement that way from that side. You just sweep it down and you just create that screed. It's known as a screed, and I think that'll do. Right, that's looking really exciting now. We've got this fabulous peak rising into the lovely light sky behind it, but I want to get some form onto this mid-ground now. So if we look at the photo, you'll see that there's these patches of different coloured vegetation. I don't know if some of it's heather, some of it's different types of heather, some of it might be bilberries, or I don't know what's up there, to be honest, or just grass. But I can see a bit of raw sienna, I can see a bit of burnt sienna, and I can see a bit of burnt umber here, these sort of slightly darker brown patches. But I can also see little trails and paths, little gullies running down from the top. Now these paths could be paths made by humans or animals, probably humans to be fair, because this is so tramped up and down, this landmark, it's incredible. So I'm just going to use the pencil, and I'm going to pencil in just a few of the darker patches, that's all, the dark, what I would call the brown ones, and a couple of the pencil trails. So there's, this kind of zigzags down like this to there, and then it sort of comes across and it zigzags around and it comes to a bit of a taper there, and then there's a little patch and there's lots of spaces in it as well, and it sort of comes up here and then ends up in a path. I don't really, yeah, you can just about see that, can't you? So there's a patch of darker paint there. There's also a little path trailing down there, and then there's a path almost from that one trailing down there, and another one trailing down there, and I've just zigzagged those lines. So those are the paths. Then also, just for the sake of balance, I'm going to invent another one, because I'm sure there is one down there as well. So you can see I've just put, it's like a little spider's web, marble lines for the paths. Right, then there's another section of the darker heather over here, which comes down to a bit of a point there. So that looks a bit like that there, and then there's another couple of smaller patches below. So I'm not going to put too much of this in, this is just so I know where it is. And then I want 1 or 2 patches down here as well. Let's have one down here. But the thing is with this, you start to make it up after a while. Because you keep looking at the photo and you think, oh, it's just all a bit too complicated. Anyway, I've basically tracked out where I want the darker patches to be. So I want 3, I've already got some raw sienna on here. So I just need some burnt sienna and I want some of the burnt umber, but I'm going to put a little bit of the plum colour into the burnt umber. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch flat brush with lots of water because I love this brush for creating what I call slicing or zigzagging. So if I get lots and lots of water in this, again, I don't want this to be too dark. If it's too dark, it'll be overpowering.
What is it, burnt umber?
Burnt sienna. This is burnt sienna. This is the orangey colour you can see there. But I'm just going to lay this down over the top now of the raw sienna that's already on. And I don't want to scrub too hard. Okay, so I've filled the brush up with paint and I'm going to sweep some of this down here, look. See, I think that's too strong still. There we are, that's nice. So it comes all the way down here. So the reason I like this brush is because I feel I can cut with it. And then I can slice the paint across like this. And you get this beautiful pattern. Zigzagging it, leaving gaps in it. So I want to leave plenty of gaps of raw sienna in there as well. I'll just take that up to there like that. That's nice. And then a little bit over here. Fabulous. That's it. That's stage 2 done. This is burnt umber. Exactly the same principle. And I've just got to fill in now these patches that I drew earlier. So let's fill this patch in here. I'm going to go over that with some burnt umber. But I'm also going to flick in a little bit of the plum. And you'll see why in a sec. That's zigzagging that brush around. It doesn't have to give it form. And then I'm going to use the rigger to just pick up a little bit of my plum from earlier. I'm going to run that little path down there. And then just drag it into the burnt umber look. So that's good. In fact, I want to that other little path there as well, isn't there? They're just coming down there, a little zigzaggy path. Can have that coming into there. Let's get that one in. And that one into there. Lovely. And then just continue. Then I've got this other section here of the burnt umber. And I want some plum in that as well. And then I want another final patch of it. A couple of patches down here, one here, one here. And I'm just going to use the rigger to finish off with a little bit of just a few little additional trails like this, just to help it look like, just to make the terrain a little bit, gives a little bit more form to it. Okay, that's dry and I'm really pleased with that. It's created all the effect that I wanted it to. So the next step now is, and providing that you've used Bockingford paper or similar, you should now be able to remove all of the paint off the rocks. Now I'm using this same 1/2 inch flat brush here, full of water. I'm going to give that a good scrub. It'll take a while to get it off. Give that a good scrub and then use kitchen towel to remove the paint. And we want the leading edge of these rocks to have a little white glint on them. So it's that front edge that's really important to get that really sharp and white. So there's just one last little stage to paint before we get to the rocks in the foreground. And that's this little patch of land here. So this is another section of moorland just beyond this screed here. So I'll just need to make sure, I'll just use the same colours. I'll just use my number 6. So I'll put some raw sienna along there first. And I'll put a little bit of burnt sienna into there as well. So that's just giving it a similar sort of colour to the rest of it. But I want to just use some of the plum now to separate these two areas. So if I just pick up some of the plum and just paint it carefully along that edge there. And then I've got to just blend that back into the land above. So I haven't got a line there, so I haven't got a stripe. It just blends, and that immediately makes that look like it's beyond the screed. I'm going to mix ultramarine and burnt umber. So I've got some ultramarine there, and I'm going to add burnt umber to that. And what you should end up with is a really dark grey, but you can make it quite warm by adding a little bit more burnt umber to it. So instead of it being that really sort of black stroke blue grey that you get from Payne's grey, we're going to end up with a much warmer colour. Now, I want each successive rock to show up against the other. So I'm going to start with the foreground rocks. Okay, so I'm going to use as big a brush as I can. I'm going to use a number 10. And I'm going to wet the whole area of this foreground rock here. I'm just going to leave the front edge white. There we are. And it's important that you watch this, because if you just go on painting, you're going to miss a really important part of it. There, I've put some water in there, just tried to leave the front edge dry. I'm going to pick up some raw sienna and just sweep it in. I'm going to put in a little bit of pure burnt umber. I'm using the side of the brush, which is ensuring that the brush there's lots of bristle coming in contact with it. But now I want some of the grey. So I'm just going to put a small amount of grey in the brush, and I'm going to try and sweep it down like this and just blend it away into the rock. And I've got to do it really quickly so that it blends and granulates. But down here I'm going to make it a little bit darker there. I want to make it look as if it's just, this rock is just disappearing down away from me here, look. So I'm inventing this a little bit. But if I just grade it and fade it away, that will be all I need to do for that rock. It's really important to dry each one off before you start the next one. So the next one is this one. Now I've got to make it look like it's a little bit darker down below. Same process then, look, little bit of water. Oh, that's grubby. Little bit of water. Leave that leading edge of the rock white, very thin white line, a little bit of raw sienna in there, a little bit of burnt umber, and then the grey again. So this is the same process as before. I'm going to bring out the edge of the rock in front with that grey, and then it has to blend into the rest of the rock then, like that, so you're not left with a line. And then if you wanted to, I'm just going to go in with a smaller brush. I've just got my number 6. I'm going to just intensify that a little because I don't think it's dark enough. So I am using some artistic license here. I appreciate that. And there it is. I can just leave that now to blend off by itself. As you can see, I've painted these 3 foreground rocks down here. I just want a little bit of heather coming in, not as much as there is on the photograph, just coming in from the left here and just tumbling through the cracks on these rocks, a little bit across here and a little bit across here. So I'm just going to vacate a little bit of space for it here. So I've just got my little 1/4 inch flat brush. I'm just going to scrub off a little bit of the paint from there. I just won't bother putting all of that in the video. There we are. There it is. This will make more sense now as I paint it. So I've got my number 6 spearhead brush. I've got some burnt sienna. Now I call this a bobbling effect. I'm kind of stippling, if you like, with the point of the brush, and I'm bobbling it in and across like this, leaving a few little white patches. I'm going to come all the way across there into the crack of that rock and just sort of finish it off there, I think. And now I need to put into that a little bit of the plum, sorry, the dark grey colour. Just a little bit on the tip of the brush. I'm just going to start blobbing in a little bit of that. That's probably enough for the whole job. That will fade a little bit. And then I can just bring out the edge of that rock, look there. With that, bring it down there and across the top of that rock there. So that's that little bit of heather coming in down there. I've got that heather in. I'm going to leave that as it is, and then I'm going to move straight on to painting these other rocks. So I need to get this one done first. So let me remind you, I'm going to wet the rock first with clear water. I'm going to leave it, I'm just going to go right up to the top edge of that rock. Get plenty of water, especially down this side and across the top there. Then I'm going to pick up the tiniest amount of burnt umber. Just swish that in. And a little bit of the burnt sienna as well. And the rest of it is now done with this dark colour. So I'm going to come across here. And I'm going to try and create the shape of this rock. Look, I'm just sort of dragging the brush round like that. Need some more paint. And if I keep the brush moving in a direction like this, it will help to produce that strata, if you like, the sedimentary sort of shape of the rock. But as I go down into this crevice down here, I've got to get it much stronger and much darker. So that's really, really dark down there, as you can see on the video. And I've got to blend this paint up and just keep pulling it round like that. There, what a fantastic effect that is. Now then, if you end up with a bit of a line here, and you just want to smooth out that edge, I think I'm going to put a little bit of this grey. I think I'm going to swish a little bit into the rock as well, just pull it across gently, just a little bit, there we are. And that smooths it all out. So that's the top of that rock done, but you can see what's really crucial is I'm going to put even more down here, is just the intensity of that paint down there. So that one needs to dry, and then I can move on and do that one. A little bit of water on that one, a little bit of burnt umber, and let's just go straight in with some really dark paint there. And then we're going to just cut into that little bit of heather there, make it look like it's standing up a little. Again here I'm cutting down this really strong paint to bring out the top of that little bit of heather that's growing in there. Right, I'm going to crack straight on and paint the distant rocks now. Exactly the same way, just some really wet and loose burnt umber, and if you look at the photograph you'll see that these rocks are quite dark on this front right hand edge. So I've got to paint each one of these successively like that, and then dry them each time one after the other like that, and get them to stand out against each other. Just one additional note here. I've actually decided that this isn't dark enough here, so I've got my number 8 brush, just put some water in it, and I'm just basically just running a little water over the whole of that rock like that, and I'm going to darken it. I didn't feel there was enough contrast down here, so I'm using a little artistic license to increase the contrast between the foreground rock and the one just sat behind it, and again I'll just swish the colour back like that, and I think that looks a lot better because that's much darker there and we get a much better contrast between these two rocks. Right, that's all done and dry. I've got 2 stages to do to this now. The main one is putting some cracks on the rocks and some marks on the rocks. But this white line, this white space that I suggested that we left at the front edge of these rocks here, has got quite a sort of hard line there. And I want to soften that. So I've got a 1/4 inch flat brush here, and I've wet it, but I'm taking most of the water out. I'm going to give it a squeeze so that it's just damp. Like that, and I'm basically just going to scrub away at that hard edge between the white flash and the paint, and it should soften it, and then gently touch it with a little bit of kitchen towel. So long as you haven't got too much water in that brush, it wants to be damp, not wet, you can then release that white space along the front of the rocks. And here I've got quite a heavy dark line, so I'm going to have to scrub that one quite hard just to release that paint. It's just there. And I'm going to do that along the edge of just the top edge of that one and this one here and that one there. Now if you look at your photograph you'll see that there aren't that many markings on these rocks evident. But as an artist I want to exaggerate that. I want to make these rocks look a little bit more natural and a bit more grainy and rugged. So I'm using a rigger, but I'm only going to use the very point of the rigger, so you've got to be careful here that you don't overdo this. So let's, for example, try and put some sedimentary lines in here. So I put the rigger on there and I can just jerk it along a bit and it just creates that crack along there. And I might just put another one at the side of it like that. So not too dark, not too orderly either. I can put some across here like that. Just be careful that you don't paint them too orderly. You don't paint them the same space apart each time. Let's put one across there. Like that. We can perhaps have one coming across the top of this. Just a little one coming over there. And then a few little marks. Little dots and marks. And scribbles. And it just makes that rock look more like a rock. Like I said, not too many. We don't want it to become overcrowded with these cracks and marks. Probably need another couple on this one here. And something along those lines, and that's pretty much done. Let's just put a couple of birds up here. Well, I've got the rigger in my hand. What we got there? A couple of hen harriers, a couple of sparrowhawks, crows, whatever. And that's it, folks. Do have fun having a go at that. I'll see you next time.